Canada believes freedom of expression is at the core of human individuality and is one of the essential foundations of a safe and prosperous society. The right of everyone to hold opinions without interference and the right of freedom of expression are in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and reaffirmed in Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. This includes the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, whether orally, in writing, or in print, or through any other media sources such as what you may be viewing this on now. So with that be understood, Metis Warrior Media Group, what we do is we hold our Metis politicians and our Metis governments at account for their actions. And so we have a right to do that, and that is what we do. We are the Metis Media News Outlet. That's what we do. We hold these governments and these politicians to account for their actions. So Canada strongly believes that media freedom remains as an important part of democratic societies and essential to the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. People need free media to provide them with accurate information and informed analysis to hold governments to account. Again, that is what we do. We are here to do that. So we are the free media, and we do hold the Metis governments at account, and also the Canadian government to account. And so everyone has the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to hold opinions and receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority and regardless of frontiers. So it's regardless of wherever you're at. This is a universal right that is actually backed up by the United Nations. Now, before we begin today's show, we have breaking news, a very important news update for you. So we had to hurry up and get this in today's show because today's show is about to go out, and this is the same time as the news release that happened today, June 8th, 2021.
So it's very, very important. The Métis governments in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario call for Clement Chartier to remove himself from all involvement with the Métis National Council.
Yes, and so this is, and when you look at what is the Métis National Council, the Métis National Council is supposed to be involved with all Métis organizations. Now all the organizations are saying that they want Chartier to remove himself.
The four leaders that represent four governing members of the Métis Nation issued a joint statement outlining their reasons for Mr. Chartier to step aside, and to really step aside this time, folks.
Yeah, because he was going to remove himself as president. He was stepping aside, but now he still hasn't stepped aside.
And with recent and serious allegations coming to light against Mr. Chartier, the four presidents agree it is in the best interest of the Métis Nation for him to immediately cease claiming to speak on the MNC's behalf. And they go on to say, while the presumption of innocence is a universally accepted principle, this is the only appropriate action that maintains the integrity of the Métis Nation, said the four presidents in this joint statement. This is a very powerful, powerful statement, folks.
So all the organizations, with the exclusion of the MMF, all the other organizations are saying, hey, we don't want Chartier as the president of the MNC, because there's been some serious problems. Obviously, what they're mentioning, they don't go into specifics, but there has been some serious allegations apparently made.
And they go on to say, in this respect, we were deeply troubled to see Mr. Chartier speaking for Métis women at the launch of the National Action Plan to End Violence Against Indigenous Women and Girls and LGBTQIA people on June 3rd. And additionally, despite repeated requests, and we've covered this before, Mr. Chartier has refused to convene a meeting of the MNC Board of Governors since December 2018, and the MNC has had no General Assembly since July 2018, folks.
Yeah, and so that's a huge problem And the reason why they've been putting out there they have not done that is because why would they do that if they're going to lose? And so that is not a democracy at all. That is a dictatorship.
And folks, Métis citizens are actively being denied their democratic right to elect their leaders, they said in a statement. Clement Chartier's term as MNC President properly ended in 2020. Mr. Chartier has also declared in 2019 that he would not be seeking re-election as MNC President. As such, Mr. Chartier has no remaining mandate as MNC President, and we do not recognize him as the current MNC President, folks.
And the MNC Board of Governors will convene on June 22nd, 2021 to appoint an interim MNC President as per the MNC bylaws until an election will be held. The Metis National Council is made up of democratically elected Métis governments in the provinces with the historic Métis homeland, the Manitoba Métis Federation, Metis Nation Saskatchewan, Metis Nation of Alberta, Metis Nation of British Columbia, and the Metis Nation of Ontario. Collectively, they constitute the General Assembly of the Metis National Council and its Board of Governors. And so they're saying, hey, we make up this Board of Governors, and you're ousted, Chartier. You're out of there, man. Nobody wants you no more. Then there's going to be a meeting to put in an interim president.
And folks, as we know, for years and years and years, there's been allegations floating around about Clement Chartier. Now, Métis people have had enough. It's time for action, folks. In my personal opinion, Clement Chartier is not morally competent to lead the Métis people across Canada, folks.
Yeah, and we see that, and we see what's going on. It's time for Chartier to step aside, as all the organizations are actually requesting that he do. Step aside. You're no longer the president, man. You're about to be replaced with an interim president. So I hope this was a good morning wake-up call for you, Chartier. So, yeah, June 8th. Mark it on your calendar. Obviously, you're going to be replaced as president of the MNC. And that is a great thing that these Métis governments are doing, these Métis organizations are doing. And so, again, the MNC Board of Governors will convene on June 22nd, 2021 to appoint an interim MNC president as per the MNC bylaws. You hear that, Chartier? They're actually going to follow the bylaws. What do you know about following bylaws? So as per the MNC bylaws until an election can be held.
And I think, folks, this is the time for Métis people right across Canada to unite in solidarity and to get rid of this tyrant that has been in charge or at the helm of the MNC, folks.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Métis Warrior here with Timothy and Alexandria.
Hello, everybody.
So today we have a good show for you. A great guest, June Graham, who's going to really talk about the tragedies of the uncovering of the 215 children and some other issues that are going on.
And folks, today's show, before we go into our guest, June Graham, we're going to dedicate the show, and we're going to dedicate the show to June's brother, who is Shane Walter Graham, and to June's mother, Louise Mary Patterson.
Yeah, and so that was what the moment of silence was before we started the show, and that is the dedication for today's show. And we do want to talk about our online store. It's going to be back up hopefully this month. That is our game plan. We did not expect that when we released t-shirts that we would have got so many requests for t-shirts, so it literally shut all of our systems down. And so we had to rework everything, and so we've been spending a lot of time rebuilding and hopefully trying to get it started back up this month in all probability.
So folks, today or this month, June, is National Indigenous History Month, so it's so important that we start opening this dialogue on what happened recently with the 215 children at the Kamloops residential school. And I'm not going to use the word discovery, because a lot of people have known about this for years and years and years. It's a genocide. It's not a discovery. And some of you may not be aware that the first residential school opened in Brantford, Ontario in 1831, before Confederation, and there was a handful of schools that were run by missionary groups even earlier than that. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, or TRC, spent years collecting survivor stories and compiling historical evidence, and the TRC issued a series of reports in 2015, and at least 150,000 First Nation, Inuit, and Metis children passed through the residential school system, according to TRC. And June will mention that in her interview. She did work with the TRC, and it's very important for everybody out there at this particular time to be gentle, show kindness. There's a lot of individuals out there that are hurting. Open wounds have been reopened with this horrific event that transpired, and there's a lot going on. And I think the thing that really bothers me the most, and I've been struggling with this since the news came out, is the Pope and the Catholic Church really need to respond to the great evil and genocide of Indigenous people in Canada, and their part that they played along with the Canadian government. And I just think it's absolutely horrific. And in my personal opinion, I truly believe that the Pope doesn't have the morality to be a spiritual leader of many, many people around the world. And as many of us struggle with the recent news, I think we need to come together in unity and again show kindness and don't judge people. And now we need to talk about this. We need to open the dialogue. We need to listen to the stories and not pass judgment.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on the Catholic Church for a moment. Ever since their existence, pretty much, there's two problems that have been within the Catholic Church. That is, they have murdered a lot of people. One, since the existence of the Catholic Church, since Catholicism existed, and two, they seem to protect pedophiles, and that's a huge problem. And a lot of people don't understand what Catholicism is. Catholicism was not the first Christian religion. The first Christian religion was actually Judeo-Christianity. The followers of Christ immediately after the crucifixion were, in fact, Judeo-Christians. If you want to look at the definition of what that means, you go ahead and Google it. But the Catholic Church has always told the lie that they were the first Christian church, and that is not true. Now, they were the first major Christian church to come into existence, but there was many. Judeo-Christian was actually the first, and then outside of Judeo-Christian you had other churches as well in Christianity, and a handful of them existed prior to Catholicism ever coming about. And so let's understand that. And also, why has been a constant problem over the now almost 2,000 years that within the Catholic Church, it's been a lot of murders committed and a lot of pedophiles. And I don't understand that. Why that is something that's supported and protected by the Catholic Church. And also we understand that the residential schools was a way to solidify colonialism with the help of the Canadian government. So at this point, everybody's asking the Pope for an apology. Clearly, he does not want to apologize. So even if he apologizes tomorrow, he's done snubbed the idea of apology ever since he's been asked for an apology. And what would it really mean at that point? If he turns around and all of a sudden apologizes? It's really a forced apology, and it's not something that's coming from the heart or something that's really felt. And so people just need to stop asking the Pope to apologize, because the apology would mean nothing at this point, because he should have apologized right from the get-go when he was first asked, and not been humming and hawing about it this whole time and basically not caring.
And to further elaborate on what Timothy said, the Catholic Church for 2,000 years has been responsible for murder, torture. Anybody that didn't go along with their way of thinking, you were a victim, you were brutalized, murdered, like I said, tortured. I mean, all you have to do is go back through history and see the atrocities that the Catholic Church were responsible for. And in reading a lot of things that are floating around social media, to see that electric chairs, cattle prods were used on Indigenous children at these residential schools, I don't know how these people can be professing that they're teaching the Word of God, because I certainly don't think that God would be behind the idea of murdering, torturing, beating Indigenous
They don't even know who
children.
God is. It is leading people down the wrong path. And in the book of Revelations, if you read the book of Revelations, it talks about the great Babylonian whore, the drunken whore. And in my opinion, that is the Catholic Church. And so if you want to go check it out, Google it. I believe it's Revelation 17, where it talks about this Babylonian whore having the blood of the saints on her hands. And, you know, it's very interesting to think that there's this organization. And actually, if you go back even further to look at the teachings of Christ, one of the things that Christ said when people said, he said that you will come to me and say, I've done miracles in your name. And I don't have the exact verse on me right now. But and he said that his reply would be, I'm going to say to you, I never knew you. And so why would he say that? Because you don't do these things in the name of Jesus. You do these things in the name of God. And so go back. It's very interesting. I believe it's in the book of Matthew. I'll put it up on the screen for people to see. But go back and read that. And it's very interesting that because that's what the Catholic Church do. They try to do miracles in the name of Christ instead of in the name of God. And Jesus Christ did die for our sins. We do recognize that as Christians, but it is not good to turn Christ into God, because that's not acceptable at all. Christ is the Son of God. Now, he did die for the sins, though.
And the philosophy really was to take the Indian out of the child. And on today, all over social media, they're saying that Pope Francis made his first public statement regarding the 215 children in Kamloops school. And I kind of read it, and I'll read some of it, because it's just BS propaganda. And part of it is, I quote, "I'm following with pain." Well, he doesn't know the pain that all the Indigenous, Metis, Inuit children felt when they were being brutalized and murdered. So that's BS The news regarding the remains of the 200, I'm not even going to say again discovery, it's not a discovery, remains of the 215 children, I join Canadian bishops and the whole Catholic Church in Canada in expressing my closeness with Canadians. Bullshit. You're not close with anybody. Maybe you're close with Satan or Lucifer, but you're certainly are not having any closeness with me. And he goes on to say, the sad blank heightens even more the awareness of past pain and suffering. May Canadian political and religious authorities continue to cooperate with determination to shed light on that sad situation. Well, that's another bullshit statement from the Pope. Shed light. They knew all about it. They're not even willing to release the names of the children. So another bullshit statement from the Pope. Shedding light is bullshit. You knew all along what was going on. Further, these difficult moments urge us to all distance ourselves from a colonizer model. And
if he felt the pain as he claimed, like you just read there, he would have apologized. Why not apologize? Because you just don't care. I was listening to a CBC interview that they did, a CBC story that they did on this, and what they were saying was that some of the cardinals are saying that they feel like if the Pope apologizes, it won't be enough and the church will have to keep apologizing. Well, yeah, if you're going to keep having pedophiles amongst your priests and bishops and cardinals, then yeah, you would have to keep apologizing, right? So let's first get rid of those evil people that are in the Catholic organizations.
And I think this statement really bothered me the most in what the Pope had to say. We entrust to God the souls of all children who died in the residential schools of Canada. And I think he really should have said all the children that were tortured, starved, brutalized, and murdered by the Catholic priests and nuns. And there was other denominations that were involved, but not on the level of the Catholic Church. And it says, we pray for the families and communities of the Indigenous people of Canada crushed by pain. But I think maybe Pope Francis, you should pray for your own soul and the soul of the murderers, because in my mind you belong in hell for what you've done. The Catholic Church has done for thousands and thousands of years. These children, it's not a discovery, folks. You've known about it. The Canadian government has known about it, and
it's just one of the many sites
that will come to light. Really, it really is. And I think we have to keep speaking the truth. And I think with all said and done, I think it's about bloody time that the Catholic Church starts paying taxes just like the rest of us. And I think that should be mandated by the government, the UN, that the Catholic Church better start paying taxes.
Well, look at what the school board out east did when they got involved in the politics. And, so, yeah, the Catholic Church should, one, I believe, be kicked out of Canada. But if they're not going to be kicked out of Canada, then, yeah, they should absolutely start paying taxes. And I think it's up to you, the people, to make that happen. They should, because they've been murderers and pedophiles for almost 2,000 years now. And so if you think about it, yeah, that's a huge problem within such an organization that claims to be a holy organization. But I do want to say one thing. One of the things I wanted to mention in the beginning was congratulations to all the people that got elected in Saskatchewan. To us, it was democracy at work. The people spoke. There was a vote that happened. A lot of people were butthurt, and they're out there claiming that it was not a fair election. It was an election, and if you have any proof otherwise that it was not a fair election, then yeah, you should send it to us, because we see that it was a democracy in action. We see that it was a fair election. And you got to accept the fact that the people spoke. McCullum won. That is the president in Saskatchewan for the Metis Nation. And people knew the election was coming. So to walk up there with an expired card when everybody knew the election was coming, or walk up there without your sticker, and then want to complain, I think that's just a weak way out of it. And so, yeah, I want to say congratulations to all the winners in Saskatchewan.
And before we head into our interview with June Graham, and you'll see this yourself, I reread this thousands and thousands of times, and it's from, again, Pope Francis, and he said this on May 15th. The abuse of and I quote, "The abuse of minors is a psychological murder. It takes away their childhood away. Therefore, the protection of children against sexual exploitation is a duty of every state. Also needed are reporting, prevention, and help for the victims." Well, certainly in that statement, Pope Francis, in my mind, you don't consider First Nation, Inuit, or Metis children human beings, or they fall under that category that is psychological murder. And before, again, we get into talking to June, we're going to post the link in the description of the video to the t-shirt that June Graham designed. Every child matters, and all proceeds from the sales will go to benefit children and youth. And it's a wonderful design t-shirt, and we recommend everybody get one or two those t-shirts to support children and youth.
Exactly. Please purchase a t-shirt, because all proceeds do go to the youth groups, and it's very important to support our youth. And it will be a great thing. You get a t-shirt, and we completely support this. And June, we could have actually talked to June for hours. I mean, you know, it was a great conversation, and with everything that she said. But I want people to understand that when we talk against Catholicism and the Catholic Church, that does not mean that our guest shares that same view. We did not ask our guest what her view was on Catholicism as a whole. So do not put our opinions on our guest. So let's first understand that. Okay, here's a little bit about June Graham before we get started in the interview, so you can know exactly who she is and what she does.
June Graham is the president of Albernaly Calquick Metis Society Region 1, and she did participate at some point with the TRC as well, and she knows a lot about counseling support systems, so a very knowledgeable lady that has a lot of strength, and we know that her story or her experience will help a lot of people.
Take a listen. Okay, everyone, we got June Graham on the phone with us, and we'd like to welcome you to the show. June, how you doing today?
Andy, thank you for having me on the show. Yeah, it's a little bit cloudy out here, and looking forward to talking to you today.
Yeah, we're very excited to talk to you too. And one of the things that we kind of did before we have you on the show here is the explanation of the t-shirts and how all proceeds are going to the youth programs. And maybe that's kind of what we'd like to start with initially, is that maybe if you can explain that and tell people where they can purchase the shirts, and we'll put a link in the video as well. Can you talk about the t-shirts for a moment?
Absolutely. The t-shirts are to represent the residential schools and the stolen children, and in relation to the 215 little bodies that were just discovered in Kamloops. And on the t-shirt, it's also with an infinity, two infinity signs. So it's also a way to honor the Metis that also were impacted by the residential schools. And I designed it after feeling very heavy for a few days on the discovery, and it was just a way of me kind of releasing my pain over that. And it got a lot of attention on social media. It was shared quite a few times, and it went across Canada, apparently. There was lots of favoritism response to it about, oh, that'd be great as a t-shirt. So we kind of put that bug in some of our ministers' ears at MNBC, and it was made into a T-shirt, and it's now for sale at the Metis Nation BC online on their store. And our provincial chair, Sean, you chair, Sean DeBourne, will be facilitating where that funding goes with his regional reps and how it can best serve our youth.
And I know, June, when I was looking at the information about the Every Child Matters shirt, and you're saying that all proceeds from the sales of the shirt will go to benefit children and youth. And I just had a question. I know I'll probably mispronounce it just for our listeners. I know you're the president of a society. Maybe so I don't butcher the name, I'll get you to pronounce it properly. What Metis society are you the president of?
I am the president of Alberta Blackfoot Metis Society. I'm in Region 1 on Vancouver Island, and Powell River covers as well.
Okay.
And I am the president of it.
Okay, perfect. And I know, I guess with everything that's happening too, as of late, and June also being the National Indigenous History Month, I think it's important. And when I seen the design of the T-shirt, and you do have muscle shirts, V-neck, and youth T-shirts available too, I think it's very important. And I think when I looked at the image that was created for the T-shirt, it's very, very powerful. And I must say I was impressed. Again, you mentioned the infinity symbol. I think it's very important that the infinity symbol go on there, because yes, it's a First Nation issue, but a lot of individuals aren't aware or not maybe educated to the fact that Métis were also involved in residential schools as well, and that's sort of to educate the world or the masses that it's not just a First Nations issue, it's also a Métis issue.
And that's absolutely right. Métis attended almost every residential school that was in Canada to one point or another. And they were impacted by the residential schools. They suffered the same kinds of abuse. That's a common theme that we hear. And since I put that design out, I've had so many Métis people come and talk about their story and the injustices that were done to them. And very interesting as well to highlight, a lot of Métis people did not qualify for any kind of compensation from the residential school settlements.
Yeah, and also I think it's very important that everybody out there grab one of these T-shirts, because as we stated earlier, the profits do go to the youth programs, and I'd like to encourage people to purchase a T-shirt, because it's more than just a T-shirt that's being purchased here. You're also giving money to the youth programs, and that's an excellent cause out there.
Yeah, and also as well, it's an untold story.
Yeah.
And so the T-shirts begin that invitation to start that uncomfortable conversation about residential schools and the Métis people, and what part we were in that story, and that we need to have our voices heard about what that means to be intergenerationally impacted by residential schools as a Métis person. Because it wasn't just having to attend those schools, it was being raised by them or not being raised by them because of it. You know, Métis people have a very important story to tell. And I don't think we've been given the platform to do that.
I agree with you completely. The Métis people have not been given a platform or a voice, and I think the recent discovery of the 215 children has really opened a wound. And people are, there's so many emotions that are going all over social media. There's so many people that are struggling, and this incident has spurred people to recall something that their mothers or their grandparents told them as a child that maybe didn't have significance at that time, but now it sort of brings back a sort of a memory. And I think what your t-shirt will do, I mean, it really can't be Canada's dirty little secret anymore, because secrets never remain secrets, and this is a wound that has been ripped open, and we have people around the world that are talking about this, this horrific discovery. And I think people have to grasp also that this is just one of many, many, many sites that are out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we would be foolish to think that this is going to be isolated incident. This is going to be something that's going to be discovered in a lot of places. And discovery is really the wrong word, because a lot of people know about those places, so they don't need to, the word discovery kind of makes you think like, oh, it's never been known before. But, with the survivors and their families, it has been known that there is burials out there, and that, people are still alive that witnessed them, and so that's a reality too. And, I just really think that with the breaking of this news, it has opened up that door. And like you said, people are beginning to, get little light bulbs go off and go, oh, I remember when my kukum told me that, or that, now it makes sense, or we piece together why our families were the way they were, and why certain behaviors occurred. That it clarifies a story for us about where our parents and grandparents might have come from, and why they were the way they were.
Right, and I think, as well, June, it opens the door to a lot of individuals that have struggled with alcohol, substance abuse as a way of dealing with trauma. And, even my own grandfather, I mean, he was an alcoholic, and I guess maybe now in my later years, I'm coming to an understanding of it was a coping mechanism to try and just get through life or suppress these horrific memories. And I know I don't know if you have a story that you'd like to share about your own sort of family's personal things, and your story, I'm sure, will help many sort of break down the barriers of fear of talking about things.
Yeah, I have a story. I have very little talked about story. I can look back and I can see how the violence, where it came from, and my kukum was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. He was in an abusive marriage, and she was quite powerless. And she was also a knowledge keeper, but I wouldn't know that because I didn't get to share that part with her. It's through my father. He tells me that she was a medicine plant woman, that she could go out and all the uses of the plant, could identify them right. she beat it thing. I didn't get that part of her. I got her son as my father.
Mm-hmm.
And he grew up angry. He grew up ashamed. And it wasn't until much later years that he explained to me that he was ashamed. And he had watched his mother be a second-class citizen in society, and she was not allowed to go inside the store. She had to give her list from the front door, and he watched as a child with his mother, and he lived in shame. And he told me he was ashamed to be in, and this is what he grew up with, and he grew angry, and naturally he attracted another wounded person, my mother, who was also intergenerationally impacted by residential schools. And they got married and had a family. And my father was extremely violent. And my mother stayed for a long time. And I was too young to have those visual memories of what happened in our lives. But all of my siblings, I remember all. And for me, I hold the body trauma memories of it. Certain things make me freeze, or I react, like in a violent situation. There's a part of me that gets triggered. Even though I don't have the visual pictures of it all, I've got the body memories of it. And so my mother endured that for years and years before she finally left. But we're talking about the days when women were not recognized. When my father was up fishing, my mother, my extraordinary, amazing mother, rebuilt our engine in the back of the property.
Right.
And one time when my father was out fishing, she took all us kids and a box of clothes, and she left. And she went to welfare, got put into a motel. My father came back from fishing, and he found out, and he went to welfare, and he said, I will look after my wife and children. And they cut my mom.
Wow.
And she was forced to go. Yeah. So that was the way it was back then. And plus, you only could be on birth control with your husband's permission.
Mm-hmm.
That never happened. So we grew up in a very violent home until my mother finally successfully left the relationship. And at that time, I not a part of my father's life again for many years. So kind of how it impacted us was my brother, I think, is hit the most. He was the only one male out of all of them.
Right.
And I think he took it the hardest and just didn't have the ability to process it and make peace with it now. And he lived a life of kind of defending my father, a need to defend, whereas the girls moved on and became strong-minded, very responsive.
Right.
And my brother became an alcoholic. And my brother was, I must say, I remarkable. He was a remarkable man. He was extremely brilliant. He was highly intelligent. He was a small child. When he was in math class, he would find his own ways to solve a math equation, and the teacher would say, "What did you do?" And my brother would say, "Is it right?" And they go, "Yes, but you didn't do it right." You know, but it was just amazing, and he was that way his entire life when he was not impacted by alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
He was this fantastic guy that could create and build anything you wanted. You know, for example, he came to my house and 2 mornings in a row he sat out in my backyard sipping on his tea and looking at this space I had cordoned off for a garden, and he said, "You know what, sister? I think I'm going to build you a greenhouse." And then he built the most amazing greenhouse that anyone would ever want, and he did that in his... Yeah, he was incredible.
And that,
he did all of those things. And
that would take us into, because we did a moment of silence prior to the show here that everybody is aware of, and that would take us into the tragedy that actually happened. Could you go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I can. The tragedy is that my brother Shane never beat his alcoholism. Many times it looked like he was winning. He would dip in and out. He'd be like the total opposite, like drinking green juice and eating the most fantastic healthy food, and he was just shining and thriving and full of life, to laying in bed with big ulcers on his feet, and back and forth for a while till it wasn't meant to be that he come out of that. And by the time that he passed last August, he was having dialysis several times a week, and he had big ulcers on his feet that he couldn't walk on because with the severe diabetes, he had feelings in his feet. He would get them often without knowing until he saw the blood on the floor. And he just became very thin for a 6-foot man. He became very debilitated and small. And I think I contribute so much of that and his demise to what happened in our lives, and the lack of resource for him to tap into to help him somehow process those pains inside of him, those traumas, the things he never ever spoke of, the demons, the ghosts that haunted him. He never had a place. He never had a place. I don't believe he ever felt safe in the world. He had high anxiety. When he got ill, I advocated strongly for him because I was passionate that he needed to have a voice and that what he had to say was very important. And he fought in his last year to get his own caretakers into his home that he liked.
Right.
Because up till then, they were the boss of who got sent in, and people got sent in that my brother did not like, and he felt extremely uncomfortable with, and had high anxiety attacks while they were there. And that was not okay. And thankfully, to our Region 1 health rep, Destiny, she facilitated with us brother Shane to be the boss of his own people that came in. And for the last year of my brother's life, he got to facilitate. He got empowered.
Well, that's good.
And that was so amazing to see, you know, that happen for him, and he was so grateful. But during that time, I saw his vulnerability of how scared he really was, how alone he really was in the world, in his own little house there. And he's not alone. He's not alone. There's so people out there suffering and stuff. My brother, there's no resources available for them. And if you think about it, we have no specific treatment, and we cannot walk into our brother and sisters' first treatment centers and be understood for our unique, distinct Métis needs.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
I have a question for you, because I know that you talked about the greenhouse. Do you still have that greenhouse up today?
Oh, I absolutely do. It is my peace oasis. I go out there and I talk to my brother and I go, "Hey, brother, we're going to grow again this year." And it's outside my bedroom window, and I stare at it. I know my brother's there, and I love him to pieces.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I think, June, we'd like to thank you for sharing that very personal story, and this show will be dedicated in honor to your brother Shane, so the story will continue, and I think these are the type of stories that need to be heard. And I think a lot of people historically may not be aware that assimilation efforts in Canada began as early as the 17th century with the arrival of the French colonists in New France. And again, they were resisted by Indigenous communities, and with the missionaries and all that kind of stuff, the Jesuits. And then after kind of a failure to assimilate Indigenous children by the missionaries in the 17th century, they say in Canada that the attempt again by religious officials started again in the 1820s. So assimilation in New France or even early Canada has a long, long history of oppression against Indigenous population. So it's just not a modern thing. It's been going on again since the 1600s. So it's always been there as a foundation with whether it be the Jesuits or whatever have you, trying to overtake Indigenous communities. And I really think it's really sick that this happened, and it's more than a dirty secret in Canada.
Well,
it's continuing.
And actually, it's a secret that it's not a secret, because a lot of people know that this is brought about also through the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church has done a lot of damage to people, and the Pope is just refusing to apologize for it. And that's a shame, because we have a lot of pictures from the period of the residential schools, and when you actually look at the nuns and you look at the priest that was involved, it's very scary to look at those pictures, because you see the fear on the face of the children, and you also see the nuns and the priests. If you pay attention to their look, they almost look like they're possessed by demons. I mean, they have that evil look to them, and you see around them as these children that have absolute terror on their face because they've witnessed these things.
Yeah, I agree. I've looked at those pictures, and even knowing that they've been propped for those pictures, like they've been given cleaner, nice clothes, been told to smile, and and they were prepped for certain questions when they came to schools and stuff. Like, oh, I want to be a nurse when I grow up, or something like that. Really little things that were wanting to be heard, and absolutely, I can't imagine being a child and being so terrified and having to go to a strange place and not be able to speak your language.
Yeah, it's
all of these.
Go ahead, June.
Yeah, it's all of those things, like, the Métis people stand with our brothers. We need to work together, and as well, we need to tell their story.
I agree, and I think people around the world have to come to the realization that it was the Catholic Church and the Canadian government. I know as of late Justin Trudeau is trying to get the Catholic Church, the Pope, to apologize, but I'm going to read you a quote here, and this is I quote, "I want to get rid of the Indian problem. Our object is to continue until there is not a single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed into the body politics, and there is no Indian question and no Indian department," end of quote. And this was the Deputy Minister of Indian Affairs, Duncan Campbell Scott, 1920. So, yes, Trudeau wants the Pope to apologize, but I think the Canadian government has an equal part in the horrific atrocities that occurred. They've got to take responsibility, and I know the federal government was in process of suing some residential school survivors. Several other politicians are asking them to cease this lawsuit. So I think instead of really playing the blame game, I think both of these individuals that had, in my mind, an equal part in the horrendous things that happened to the children and the families, something has to be done instead of just all this talk and all this, in my mind, BS propaganda.
I agree. Very familiar with that quote. It's heartbreaking, but you think it's targeted at vulnerable young children that cannot protect themselves. And I totally agree. There's a lot of work has to be done. And what was a couple points I was going to say about what you're talking. I personally am a registered clinical counselor.
Right.
I have worked 35 years on the front people, and I have a lot of experience listening to those horrific stories. And I traveled with the TR across Canada, and I heard the stories of survivors and families. And one thing that stuck out in one particular court case, Port Alberni here, was a judge labeled the residential school of pedophilia. And I think that's quite fitting. Probably all the schools.
Right.
Sexual abuse, child sexual abuse was in the residential schools. And there was a lot of things that occurred in the a lot of horrific things in the schools and children committing suicide. You know, if you think of what would ever push a child to decide that that's the best option, is to end your life.
Yeah.
And the children that ran away never made it home. They died. Or they ran away and the police came and got them. You know, even though their family tried to hide them, the police came and got them and took them back. Such powerlessness, such oppression, and it's no wonder that the families became who they were, where they felt alcohol. Because I can't imagine my children being ripped from me and having nothing left in my life as a parent. And this is what happened to our children. They've taken away without our consent. And we became powerless as parents.
Exactly, and I think it's absolutely horrific. And I read something. I've been reading a lot on what Pope Francis has been saying, and it kind of makes me angrier. And I know he posted this on April 25th that he was extremely sad over a tragedy that happened in the Mediterranean where 130 migrants died in the sea. And he said they are people, they are human beings. And he has not once posted anything about the residential schools or the Indigenous children, Metis children that suffered horrific abuse. And the first thing that popped in my mind on this, what Pope Francis said, well, are you saying that Indigenous, First Nation, Metis, Inuit children are not human beings? Because you can't even take a minute of your day to post about the atrocities that the Catholic Church did to innocent, he's worried about migrant children that died. Okay, that's not right, it's sad. And he said they're human beings, but aren't Indigenous, Metis, Inuit children human beings?
Exactly. I mean, it's every child matters, of course, where they're from, but something as huge as the residential schools and construction and the history and the continued pain that still impacts life today, and for him not to push that is disgraceful. And I think as Indigenous people, we need to allow that not to stop us. That we know the truth. This is important for our people to remember this, is that we know the truth. No matter how society or whomever wants to negate that this happened, it does not make it untrue. And as a people, we were born into being strong people. And we are kinship. We stand together. We heal together. We move forward. And people like the Pope cannot stop us from doing that.
Right. And they're a haven for people who we know has been mistreating children for, years and years and years. It's the Catholic Church protects a lot of these people that are committing these atrocities against children. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, what advice would you give people that are having trouble coping? Is there anything that people can do? Because I know you said there's not a place that people can go to. It's very, very few places that people can go to that are suffering. In the Metis communities anyway. But if people looking to try to cope with these situations, what advice could you give them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a really important question because there are a lot of people out there suffering in silence. And they're being traumatized by watching social media, and they're heartbreaking. They're feeling hopeless. It's opening up wounds that they have somehow managed to put away and move on in some fashion. So it's really important now to say, one, if you're listening out there and you are a survivor, I see you. I see you, and I validate you, and I believe you. What your story is, and I want you to know that it was your fault what happened. It was never your fault. The fault of the predators that ran the school and that never deserved any of them. Absolutely any of them. And it's really important that as Métis people, we seek support, that we talk to our nation, to our Métis society, and ask for, and start up some groups in your community. Talk to your, ask about funding to create things that will support people during these things. And I know Metis Nation, BC, we have a program now where you're eligible for 10 sessions with registered counselor or psychologist of your choosing, and to help people. And of course, in the big picture, that's not much in terms of deep experiences, but it's a start, and we need to begin voice and bring attention to the fact that we need specific treatment in Canada. We need a place that as people we can go to, specifically have our needs met in a safe environment where we can tell our story and others get it. They understand. By that I mean, as invisible people for so long, for myself, my experience itself is about growing up with it inside my soul. And it was about a need. It was about an empty. It was about contact. It was about connection. And I remember when my first husband that I never met, and this maybe 10 years ago. I'm 61.
Right.
I remember when I met the hotel lobby in Vancouver, my heart opened up big as it could, and it was like we were never apart. It was like 50 years had not. We filled in each other's words. We were familiar, and it was amazing.
That's incredible.
And come home. Yes, and then and met my other cousin Nick in Edmonton, and she's my. And it's amazing to come in family kinship.
That's absolutely incredible. And I know you're talking about the unique supports that are needed for Métis people, because I know that there's 24-hour crisis lines for Indian residential school survivors. like, are there any unique ones for Métis that can call, or because I know that's for Indian residential school survivors, but I really think, like you're saying, there should be a support line for Métis residential school survivors where their unique experiences and needs will be covered, and then the First Nations have their own. But I think it's important that every province would have one specifically for Métis.
We actually in British Columbia, we have a Métis crisis line, and it's something that the Metis Nation BC funds into at the Kuas crisis line, which is actually here in Port Alberni. So we do have a Métis-specific crisis line, yes.
Yeah, and I think it's important that every province has that unique Métis crisis line.
But I want to touch on something that you said earlier when you were talking about coping skills and people being able to cope with that have actually went through the residential schools. But what I want to kind of speak to right now is for the children of the people who went through the residential schools, for the actual children that grew up in these households, from their parents being traumatized in these schools, and that resulted in a lot of domestic violence, that resulted in a lot of child abuse, and sometimes the children didn't understand why the parents were acting like this. And I can guarantee you the parents themselves, the survivors of the residential schools, and I'm not saying everybody that went to a residential school became a domestic abuser or became a child abuser. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that those that did themselves didn't even understand why they were doing it. And I think that because of the trauma that they got as a child, when they became adult and have children, they really didn't understand how to give that love to their children in the proper way because of their personal childhood trauma.
Absolutely, that's right. And so it's about those children of the survivors beginning to understand that this was not about them, that it was never about them. It was about the inability of the parents to be able to parent. It was about the parents not having a sense of identity and pride.
Exactly.
Through that, through their low self-esteem and their lack of identity and pride, that came out through their parenting or lack of parenting. And so I think as children of those like myself, it's about remembering that this is not a reflection of us. It is our parents' story, and we need not judge ourselves through those behaviors, but to understand that it was their story. It was from what happened to them, and that we need to disconnect from that when it comes to loving ourselves, because it's really hard to love yourself when you're raised in a less than loving environment sometimes, or abusive, violent environment.
Yes.
And so it's about learning to have a relationship with self and loving yourself and finding your self-worth and being proud. And I'm happy to say that my mom was able to do that. My mom, I believe I was around 17 when my mom began to finally become loving, openly, hugging, kissing. And she continued that until the day she passed on February 18th, a year and a bit ago.
Yep.
She from a battle of cancer, and but she broke that cycle. She broke that cycle.
Exactly, and the cycle of abuse needs to stop, because the residential school survivors, those that became abusers to either their spouses or their children, those children would oftentimes grow up and become abusers themselves. And there needs to be a time of healing and forgiveness, and you have to understand that cycle of abuse has to stop. And you have to forgive, because your parents that survived, they were just as lost. And like you said, there was a lack of parenting skills there, and they didn't know the right things to do because of look how they were raised in this horrific environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So it's about remembering that, you know, and I mean, not all children that were raised in domestic violence became offenders, but some did, and others often became victims in life as they grew up. They you know, after witnessing abuse for so long, that's what they themselves came to in a relationship. When they sought a relationship, they found themselves in an abusive relationship that was duplicating what they had been raised in.
And that's probably how they felt like they were loved, because that's the only way they were they could probably try to see. Because if their parents abused them as a child, and then they get with somebody that's abusing them as an adult, then they probably are confused and thinking, well, this must be love or something, you know. And I don't know. It's very I don't know. It's beyond my understanding, but I know that cycle has to stop for sure.
I think when you're raised in that kind of environment, you could have low self-esteem and low self-worth, and you don't believe in yourself, and you attract a partner that continues to advocate for that, and you just believe it's the truth. It's just the way that you are unworthy, that you are unlovable, and that you deserve this. And that's a really sad tragedy, because it's about, we need to start that long self-journey from head to heart, and we need to begin to love ourselves, value ourselves, be our self-worth, and to believe in ourselves, and to strongly advocate for us to get what we deserve, and to demand respect.
Yes.
And you know what, June, what really bothers me as well is that Indigenous, First Nation, Metis people, Inuit people, we are a resilient people, because you know what, we're still here. And the thing that really bothers me is that I'm reading all these media releases from various religious organizations, and they are refusing to come to terms. And this one was a media release May 30th, and it's from Father Ken Thornson. And he keeps using again the word discovery, and then he's saying, on behalf of the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate. And the Missionary Oblates were administrator and teachers at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. So, you know, he's deceiving the public because he keeps using the word discovery. If the missionaries were the administrators and the teachers at the Kamloops Indian Residential School, it isn't, like you said, a discovery. They knew all about it. And he goes on to say, through our own ongoing reflection and the work of the TRC, we are growing into a deepening awareness of the damage. For goodness sakes, beating a child, starving a child, burying children in mass pits, aren't you aware at the time that you're doing it that it's damaging Indigenous people? And I just about threw up when I continued to read what Father Ken Thornson said. And they're saying the growing awareness leads us to an increased desire to listen deeply and learn. it just turned my stomach that, these missionary were administrators and teachers at the Kamloops residential school, and they keep using the word discovery. Well, for God's sakes, you knew all about it, and they're just trying to put a propaganda out there. Never is there an apology. Never in one of these religious press releases do you see an apology. They use the same words, sincere regret, sadness. Well, that's not an apology, because he's just covering up for, the pedophiles, what happened there at the church, when he clearly says that,
pedophiles and
murderers and doing experiments on children. This father, Ken Thornson, I think he should hang up his clergy attire and call it a day, because he's not serving the word of God. And like I said, you see numerous of these press releases, even by the Pope himself, and it's in my words, it's just a bunch of BS, because there's so much public outcry. And what they're doing is they're just showing the Indigenous, Metis, and Inuit people that they still have the same belief system as when they were doing the abuse. They just got caught because their, in quotations, discovery has hit the world. And for them, you see all over where they're refusing to release records so we could have names to these beautiful children is disgusting.
Yeah, I agree. It's very condescending. And yeah, I totally agree with that, and I've been reading a lot of it too, and a lot of it is meaningless. Most of it is so meaningless. It's like it's not directly.
Well, you know what? That's right. And, even Pope Francis on May 15th goes out to say the abuse of minors is a psychological murder. It takes away their childhood. So here you have Pope Francis saying that it's psychological murder. Yet again, the Indigenous, Inuit, Metis people, I guess he doesn't consider them again human beings, because he posted that May 15th.
Yeah. No, I agree. My husband is First Nations, from the Nation, and he was raised by his grandparents. He was parent, he's old for them to raise him, because he was the first grandson, and he was taught culturally and traditionally, but he was not taught his language, because his grandparents feared that if he went to residential school, he would be beaten. And so he did not. But he lived, the residential school was right beside the reserve, and so he could see the residential school. And he was there, but his grandmother worked at the residential school, and one of her jobs was taking fetuses from abortions down to the incinerator.
Wow.
And that was the rapes to the young.
Yeah. That's
there's a saying here that, the walls of residential schools are made out of dead babies, and it's probably so. We've both definitely been impacted in our own ways by residential, and I really, really, truly believe, though, that regardless of the non-supporters or the ones that aren't able to get real about this, that we mustn't ever let them block us in our journey to wellness, to healing our hearts and bringing our nation together. We cannot be back by them, and we know the truth, and that's what we need to continue to support, is the truth, and support each other, as we go through this process of dealing with the residential, how it impacted us as a people.
June, on that note, do you think that this event of many yet to come will bring unity? Do you think that'll bring unity to Indigenous Métis people, unite us as a people over this tragic event? Do you think that will happen?
I will pray that it. Yes, I believe we need to stand together as one, because the First Nation, maybe even the Inuit, experienced residential schools. And I think it's very important as part of our healing journey that we recognize that we have a shared experience that has impacted us as a people, as Indigenous people. So I pray, and I know that the Métis people I talk to, they certainly hope that we can stand in solidarity together with our Nation brothers and sisters and our Inuit brothers and sisters. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to mention that on June 21st, National Day, at 7 p.m., from coast to coast is requesting across Turtle Island that you raise voices, you raise your drums, you do your morning calls and songs into the quiet evening. Let them hear you. So that's been a request to just put that out there if folks want to join in on that. And
Yes.
I'd kind of like to just a quote I saw on Facebook really resonated with me, and by Adina Morgan. The bones of those that history sought to forget are rattling the earth beneath our.
Yes.
Yeah, that says it all. It really does.
Yeah. And we definitely this has been a great interview with you. So June, we'd like to thank you for joining the show today. I'm pretty sure that your words can be healing and helpful to a lot of people out there that are suffering and can relate to the situations that we talked about today.
And it's very important that June, again, is National Indigenous History Month, and the Every Child Matters t-shirt with all proceeds from sales will go to benefit our children and our youth. We will post a link in the description of the video. Please purchase one of these t-shirts, an awesome, very epic design by June Graham.
And I'd just like to say for having me. I'm very honored, and I'm really humbled and proud to the tops of the mountains that my brother will be remembered to, and of course my mama, because without her I wouldn't be here. So hands up to her. She's my friend and my first love, and so without her raising wouldn't be here. So I just want to acknowledge my mother and my brother. And
okay, and so that's awesome. Awesome dedications, and
again, thank you for joining us, June. We really appreciate it, and we know that you will reach a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.